After I put $6 million in trust for my kids, my wife told me I wasn't their father. My son said, "We've known for 6 years." The exhibit was marked Plaintiff's 14, and it was a screenshot of a text message from October of 2019. My attorney slid it across the conference table. 22nd floor, downtown Houston, one of those rooms with a view of the ship channel where everything is glass and nobody raises their voice. My son had sent it to my daughter at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, 6 years ago. He'll never find out. Just let him sign whatever he wants to sign. My son was 34 years old at that table. He read his own message, and then he looked at the wall behind me, and the lawyer his mother was paying for asked if we could take a 10-minute recess. That was a Thursday in November. 8 months earlier, I had signed $6.2 million into a trust for 3 children, and I had cried in my truck in the parking garage afterward because I was so happy. Before I take you back to the beginning, tell me down in the comments where you're watching from. And answer me this, because I've been asking myself for a year now, is there anything your family could keep from you that you couldn't forgive? Hit that like button and stay with me, because what I found out that spring, I found out in the wrong order. My name is Nathaniel Ashford. Everybody calls me Nate. I'm 62 years old. I was born in Acres Homes on the north side of Houston, and I started as an apprentice pipe fitter with Local 211, 3 months after my 19th birthday. I've still got the scar. Left forearm, about 4 inches, from a torch that got away from me on a rack job at a plant in Baytown in 1986. My kids used to ask about it when they were small. I'd tell them it was where the money came from. I ran fitters for 11 years, and then in 1997 I started my own outfit out of a rented bay off Airline Drive with 2 trucks and a phone that I answered myself. Ashford Mechanical. Commercial and industrial HVAC and process piping. 26 years later, it was 230 employees. And last year I sold it. That's the whole story of my working life. And it's the reason there was $6.2 million to put anywhere. Nobody gave it to me. I put it together a weld at a time. But I want to slow down on one part of it, because the number by itself doesn't mean anything until you know what it's made of. There were 4 years in the early 2000s where I did not take a paycheck. Not a small one. None. Adrian worked and we lived on that, and I put every dollar the company made back into equipment and payroll. Because when you're small and you miss a payroll one time, that's it, you're done. The good hands leave, and they tell everybody why. I miss things. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was a perfect father, because I wasn't. I missed Danielle's middle school graduation for a shutdown at Texas City. I missed a whole lot of Saturdays. Bryce played 2 years of high school football, and I saw maybe 5 games. And I've thought about that more since all this happened than I care to admit. But I'll tell you what I didn't miss. Every one of those kids got picked up on the first day of school by me, every year, in a work truck, because I set that rule in 1993 and I never broke it. I'd be filthy. Imani used to make me park down the block when she got to 8th grade because I embarrassed her, and I did it, and I still came. None of those 3 ever had a job in high school. None of them ever had a student loan except Imani, and that was her own doing, and I'll get to it. I built all of that so they wouldn't have to start where I started. That was the entire point of my life. I didn't have a hobby. I had that. March 14th, I signed the trust. I'd been planning it for a year, not a will. I didn't want my children waiting on my funeral to have anything. I set up an irrevocable trust, and I funded it with $6.2 million. And I split it 3 ways. Bryce, 34. Danielle, 31. Imani, 20, sophomore at Prairie View. I did it at the offices of an estate firm in the Galleria area with a notary and a man named Peter who explained the word irrevocable to me 4 separate times. You understand, Mr. Ashford. Once this is executed, you can't undo it. It's not yours anymore. That's the point, I said. I don't want to be able to change my mind. I want them to know it's theirs. I bought a bottle of something good on the way home, and I made a toast at the dinner table that night. And I told my 3 children that everything I had was theirs, and that no Ashford would ever have to start where I started. Bryce said, "That's great, Dad." Danielle was texting. Imani got up and hugged me around the neck from behind my chair and said, "Daddy, that's crazy," and laughed into my shoulder. I remember thinking that was a good night. 2 weeks later, my wife told me none of them were mine. Adrienne and I were married 34 years. She's 58, court reporter for a long time. Then she stopped working around 2010 and never went back, which was fine with me because by then, it didn't matter. The marriage had been going cold for about 3 years, and I'm not going to pretend I couldn't see it. It got worse after I sold the company, because I was suddenly home. That's a thing nobody tells you. 26 years I was gone before 6 and back after 7, And it turns out that had been holding something together. And when I stopped, whatever it was came apart. By that March, she'd already been to a lawyer. I didn't know that yet. The fight was on a Sunday, in the kitchen, and it was about something stupid, a trip to see her sister in Shreveport that I didn't want to take. It escalated the way they do. And then she said she wanted a divorce, and I said fine, and I said something I regret, which was that after 34 years, I'd at least know I gave my children more than my daddy gave me. And she got very still. Then she said, "They're not yours." I said, "What?" "None of them." She was leaning back against the counter with her arms folded. Calm, that's the part, not one of them, Nathaniel. And she smiled. Not a big one, just enough. 2 weeks, she said. You signed that money over 2 weeks ago. You can't take it back, can you? That's what irrevocable means. That's why she told me. I want to be plain about it, because it's the whole hinge of this thing. She didn't tell me out of guilt, and she didn't tell me because it got away from her. She told me because she believed the timing made her safe. She'd been sitting on that sentence for 34 years, waiting for a day when it would cost her nothing, and she thought that Sunday was the day. I didn't yell. I got my keys and I drove out Beltway 8 for about 2 hours, past the plants I'd worked in when I was 25, and I came home at 11 at night and slept in the guest room. And then I did the only thing a man can do, which is find out. There's a lab in a strip center in Sugarland, between a nail salon and a place that ships packages. Legal paternity testing, walk-ins welcome. I sat in that waiting room on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock with a clipboard. I need to tell you what that's like, and then I'm not going to ask you for anything else in this whole story. I'm 62 years old. I have built things that are still standing. And I sat in a plastic chair holding a clipboard, filling in the names of my own children as alleged child, while a young woman at the desk, who was maybe 25, kept her voice extra kind with me, because she does this all day, and she knows what a man in that chair looks like. I did all three. Bryce and Danielle. I got through their toothbrushes when they were at the house for Sunday dinner, which is a legal gray area I did not care about. Imani's. I got the honest way. I called her at school and told her I needed a favor I couldn't explain yet, and she drove down from Prairie View and swabbed her own cheek in a parking lot in Sugarland and asked me exactly 0 questions. That's the difference between my children, right there, and I didn't even see it at the time. 9 days. I want to tell you about those 9 days because I've never met anybody who talks about that part. I went to work in the shop. I had a side job going for a guy I came up with, changing out a condenser at a church in Sunnyside, and I did that job the way I've done every job, and nobody looking at me would have known one thing. I ate dinner with Adrian twice in those 9 days. She'd moved into the guest room by then, and we were being extremely polite with each other, and neither one of us said the word test, and I have wondered since whether she knew I'd done it. And every night I lay in that bed doing the same thing, which was going through my own children's faces looking for myself. That's what a man does. Bryce's hands, Danielle's laugh, which is my mother's laugh. I would have sworn to it in a courtroom. Imani's stubbornness, which everybody in my family always said, came straight off my daddy. I found me in all 3 of them, every night, 9 nights running. And then a woman I'd never met emailed me a PDF. 0 for 3. I read it in my truck. Probability of paternity, 0%. 3 times, 3 sheets, same 2 words at the bottom of each one, excluded as the biological father. Now here's where I made my mistake, and I want to be honest about it, because it's the worst pain in this entire story, and I walked into it on my own 2 feet. I decided we were going to get through it together. That's genuinely what I thought. I sat in that truck and I thought, they're my kids. 34 years, 31 years, 20 years. Whatever their mother did in 1990 has nothing to do with the boy I taught to drive a stick in the parking lot at Northline. We're going to sit down, all 4 of us, and this is going to be the worst day of our lives, and then we're going to be all right. I called all 3 of them and asked them to come to the house on Saturday. I said it was important. Adrian was at her sister's by then. I made coffee. I set the papers face down on the table because I didn't want them to see it before I could say it right. I had it planned out. I was going to tell them that it changed nothing. They came in. Bryce first, Danielle behind him, Imani last, still in her car clothes with a duffel bag because she'd driven in from school. And I started talking, and about 4 words and my voice went, which does not happen to me. I got through it. I said I'd had a test done. I said all 3 of them came back excluded. I said I was so sorry that they were finding out this way, and that I loved them, and that not one thing about us was going to change. And my son said, "Dad, come on." I looked at him. "We know," Bryce said. He had his phone in his hand. He didn't put it down. "We've known since 2019. The room did not move. Danielle said, "Bryce." "What?" He's got the paper right there, Danny. Bryce shrugged at me. Actually shrugged. I did one of those ancestry kits at the end of grad school. Everybody was doing them. Nothing lined up on your side. I asked Mom about it and she told me. 2019, I said. Yeah, you've known for 6 years. So, Dad, and here's the part. Here's the exact part. He said it like I was being difficult. Like I'd brought up something socially awkward at a dinner party. It's not. Nobody was trying to do anything to you. It just wasn't a thing that needed to be a whole big deal. You're our dad. What difference does it make? Danielle was looking at her phone. I said, Danielle, I found out in 2020. She said it to the table. Bryce told me. And neither one of you. What were we supposed to say? Bryce said. His voice actually went up. He was getting irritated with me. Walk in and blow up your whole life? Mom asked us not to. Honestly, we were protecting you. 6 years? 6 years of Thanksgivings. 6 years of me calling him about a truck he was thinking of buying. 6 years of Father's Day texts. 6 years of me putting money into a company I was building for the three of them. And every single time I said the word son in that house, he knew, and he was managing me. And the thing that went through me at that table wasn't rage. It was something worse and quieter. It was the understanding that I was the only person in the room grieving. To them, this was a 6-year-old piece of information that had come up again. To me, it was Saturday morning. I'd walked in there to hold my family through the worst news of their lives and found out I was the last one to hear it. I was the only one it happened to. Then I looked at Imani. She hadn't said one word. 20 years old, sitting on the edge of the sofa with her hands in her lap, and her face had gone gray. She said, I didn't know, and she turned to her brother and said, You knew? Bryce said, You were 14, Imani. I'm 20 now. It didn't come up. She stood up and walked out the front door, and I heard her car start, and I sat there in a room with 2 grown people who were annoyed with me for making it awkward. Marion Teague has an office off Post Oak and about 40 years of estate litigation behind her. She read all 3 lab reports without changing her face, and then she put her pen down. Mr. Ashford, I'm going to give you the honest version, not the version you want. That's what I'm here for. You want to sue your wife? In Texas, that road is mostly closed. There is no clean standalone claim for what you're describing that's going to survive. Lawyers have been trying it for 30 years. So she just, let me finish. She tapped the trust document. This is a different story. An irrevocable trust is hard to undo. It is not impossible to undo. A trust can be set aside to the extent its creation was induced by fraud. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. Fraud, a material fact, known to be false, concealed, that you relied on when you signed. I signed it because they were my children. Yes, and more importantly, you signed it 2 weeks before your wife told you they weren't, which means she sat on it while you funded it. Marion took her glasses off. Now the part that matters. If it's only your wife who knew, this is a hard case, and it takes 2 years, and you might lose. If the beneficiaries themselves knew, the adult beneficiaries, the ones who took the money, that's a completely different animal. My son told me he's known since 2019. She was quiet a second. Did he say that in front of witnesses? He said it in front of his sisters. Mr. Ashford, she said, then what we're going to do is not make speeches. What we're going to do is subpoena phone records. If you're still with me, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what came back in discovery is the part I still can't read twice. It took 4 months. Nobody stood up in a courtroom and pointed at anybody. What happened is that a records custodian at a phone company produced 6 years of messages, and a paralegal put them in a binder with numbered tabs. October 2019, Bryce to Danielle, did the test. He's not it. Mom confirmed. Don't say anything. Danielle back, 3 days later. Are we telling him Bryce? For what? So we lose everything, Parub. Then, later that same night, the one they put on a screen in a conference room. He'll never find out. Just let him sign whatever he wants to sign. There's a message from Adrian to Danielle in 2022 that says let him do his trust thing, it's the only thing he talks about. There's one from Bryce in January of this year, 2 months before I signed, that says don't get weird around him this year, he's finalizing it in the spring. 211 pages. The thing about paper is it doesn't get emotional, and it doesn't misremember. Marion never had to argue a thing, she just put the binder on the table. The settlement conference was 90 minutes. I sat on one side with Marion. Adrienne and Bryce and Danielle sat on the other with a lawyer who, about 40 minutes in, asked for that recess and took his own clients out into the hallway, and when they came back, Danielle had been crying and Bryce would not look at anybody. The trust was unwound. Not by a judge, not by a verdict, not by a speech. It was unwound because their attorney told them in a hallway what a jury in Harris County would do with 211 pages of a man's children arranging to keep him quiet while he signed. $6.2 million came back. The whole thing was over, in less time than it takes to get from Katy to Baytown in traffic. The divorce went about how Marion said it would. Texas is a community property state, but a court can divide that property unevenly when there's fault. And 34 years of concealed adultery documented in her own children's text messages is about as much fault as a person can carry into a courtroom. Adrian's own lawyer told her to take a deal. She took it. She's in a 2-bedroom in Missouri City now. Her sister's in Shreveport and they don't speak. I saw her one time after all of it. Kroger on Highway 6 of all places. About a year later. We stood in the aisle like two people who used to know each other. I asked her the only question I had left, which was why she never told me. Not in 1996, not in 2005, not ever. And she said, because you'd have left. I said, Adrian, I wouldn't have left those kids. And she looked at me and said, you wouldn't have left them. That's the closest that woman has ever come to telling me the truth about anything. 34 years she kept it because she knew it wasn't the children I'd have walked away from. It was her. She said, take care of yourself, Nate, and pushed her cart on down the aisle. And that's the last conversation I've had with my wife of 34 years. The biological father surfaced about 5 months in. His name is Roland Meeks. He's 66. He was a friend of ours from the old neighborhood who used to come to cookouts. I want you to understand, this man ate at my table. He held Danielle when she was a baby. He and Adrian had a thing that ran, on and off, from about 1989 to 1996, which covers all 3 of my children. I never confronted him. I've got nothing to say to Roland Meeks. But Bryce and Danielle went to see him. That part I know, because Imani told me. He lives in an apartment in Greenspoint. He's got emphysema and a walker, and a 14-year-old Buick. And when 2 grown children showed up at his door wanting to know who they were, he was polite for about 20 minutes and then, according to Danielle, he asked whether there was any money in it. That's it. That's the man. 34 years. And the answer at the end of it is a sick old man in Greenspoint, asking if there's anything in it for him. Imani took her own test. She didn't tell me she was doing it. She drove herself to a lab in Hempstead near her school, and 9 days later, she drove down to my house on a Sunday, with the envelope unopened in her lap, because she wanted to open it with me. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said, I know I don't. Same 2 words. Excluded as the biological father. She read it and set it on the table, and she was quiet a minute. And then she said the thing I'm going to carry with me, until they put me in the ground. Okay, she said, so I don't care who he is. I know who my father is. And then she got mad, not at the paper, at everybody else. Bryce knew when I was 14, she said. You know what I did when I was 14? I made you that ugly clay thing for Father's Day. You still got it on your desk. She was crying by then. He let me do that knowing. She cut her mother off that spring. There was no big scene. Imani just stopped answering. Adrian called, then texted, then had Danielle call, then showed up at Prairie View one time, and Imani wouldn't come down. I should say what that girl actually did during those months. Because she stuck by me, is easy to say, and it doesn't cost anything. She drove down from Prairie View almost every other weekend that whole semester. That's about an hour each way in a 2013 Corolla with 140,000 miles on it. She'd come in Friday night, and she never once made me talk about it. She'd just be in the house. She'd put a game on. One Saturday, she found me sitting in the shop at 11 in the morning, not doing anything, just sitting on a bucket, and she pulled up another bucket and sat there with me for about 40 minutes and didn't say one word. And then she said, "You want a sandwich?" Her grades slipped that spring. She had a 3.8, and it went to a 3.1, and I found out about it from a professor's email she left open on the counter, and when I brought it up, she said it wasn't my business and to leave it alone. 20 years old. It cost that girl something real. She was 20 years old and she cut off her mother, and there are nights I know she sits with that, because a daughter is supposed to have a mother and now she doesn't. I told her one time, about a year in, that she could talk to Adrian if she wanted to and it wouldn't hurt me. She said, "That's not why I'm not talking to her, Daddy." I let it be after that. Bryce came back in the spring. He called and asked to get lunch, and we met at a place on Washington Avenue, and he showed up with a folder. That's what I want you to hear. My son came to the table with a folder. He had a business he wanted to start, a logistics thing, brokerage. He had projections. And the pitch, the actual pitch he made to me across the table, was that the family should get past this, and that the smartest thing I could do at my age was put capital behind somebody who understood the industry. Not one time did he say he was sorry for the 6 years. He said he was sorry about how everything came out. That's a different sentence. That's an apology for the discovery process. I let him finish. I've learned to let people finish. Then I said, "Bryce, do you remember the parking lot at the old Northline Mall?" He said, "What? You were 16. I taught you to drive a stick out there. You stalled it about 30 times. And you got so mad you started crying, and you wouldn't let me see it. So you got out and stood behind the truck for a minute." He didn't say anything. "I think about that a lot," I said. "That was real. That happened. Nobody can take that off me. I put my card down for the check. But you sat at my table for 6 years and managed me. And when I finally told you, you were annoyed. Not sorry. Annoyed. I said, 'I'm not investing in your company.' And I left, and I sat in my truck in that parking lot for about 15 minutes before I could drive. Danielle came in the summer. Hers was tears, and I believed the tears were real, and I still said no. She said, 'You were the only father I ever had.' And I said, 'I know. That's what makes it what it is.' Because that's the thing nobody wants to hear. It would have been nothing to tell me. One sentence, 6 years ago. 'Dad, we need to talk.' I'd have cried, and then I'd have made breakfast the next morning, and every single one of them would still have their share right now. They didn't keep it from me because it was too painful to say. They kept it from me because saying it might cost them money. That's in their own handwriting, on page 71. That's what I couldn't get past. Not the DNA, the math they did. Here's where things sit now. I bought a smaller place out past Katy, 4 bedrooms, which is 3 more than I need, but I wanted room for people. I've got a shop out back with a lift in it, and I've started taking on the odd side job for guys I came up with, mostly to have somewhere to be. I put $2 million into a scholarship fund through the Union Hall, apprentice fitters, first-year tools and dues covered, 12 kids a year. I did it because when I was 19, my daddy could not give me a set of tools, and a man I barely knew loaned me his, and I've never once forgotten it. There's 12 19-year-olds in Houston right now with a box of tools that has nothing to do with whose blood is in them. Imani graduated in May, health administration. She's working at a hospital system in the medical center, and she is, by a distance, the most decent person I have ever met. She fought me over her tuition, actually fought me. She had loans in her name from before all this, and when I said I'd clear them, she told me no, that she didn't want anybody ever saying she stayed for the money. I cleared them anyway, and told her afterward, and she was furious for 2 days. She calls me on Sundays. She comes out to the house about twice a month, and she cooks something, and it's usually not good, and I eat all of it. And here's the last thing, and it's the only thing in this entire story that I've never said out loud to a single living person. 3 months ago, I signed a new will. It leaves nearly all of it to Imani, the house, what's left of the sale money, everything but the scholarship endowment, and a piece to the union's widows fund. She doesn't know. She isn't going to know. She'll find out from a lawyer in a conference room someday when I'm not around to see her face, and she is going to be angry with me, and she'll probably say something about how she never wanted it, and she'll mean it. That's exactly why she's getting it. I gave $6.2 million to 3 people who knew something about me they wouldn't say, and I'm giving what's left to the one who found out the same thing and drove 2 hours to sit at my table and tell me it didn't matter. I didn't lose my children. That's what people say to me, and they mean well. And they're wrong. I had 3 children, and 2 of them made a decision about me in 2019 and never told me, and the third one made a different decision in about 4 seconds, out loud, in front of me. Blood didn't pick any of that. They did. So if you take one thing from an old fitter who found out at 62 that everything he thought he knew was arranged around him, it's this. Watch what people do when telling you the truth would cost them something. That's the only test that's ever meant anything. Everything else is just paperwork. So let me leave you with the question I've been carrying. If you were sitting in my chair, would you have written that check for Bryce? Or would you have done what I did? Tell me down in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from while you're there. If this story hit you somewhere, hit that like button and subscribe, because I've got another one coming, and I'll see you on the next one.